Do you know where to find the oldest city in the U.S. and its territories?
Where?
Let me tell you.
Deal! Hello, welcome to week 9 of Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa. We're so glad that you would come and join us again today. Hopefully you've been able to see many of our past ones, especially when it comes to the missionary story, because we're coming up near the end of Operation Auca. But before we get to that, today Alyssa has a special treat for us. She is going to tell us about the time that she and her brother David went to Puerto Rico. And so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I've seen a few pictures already, but she's going to share with us what they did. And actually, I don't even know what else, so...
Well, you have to watch.
Go ahead.
So first, let's talk about where can you find Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is an island down here, kind of south of Florida, just off in the ocean a bit. And it is a U.S. territory, like Guam. So it's not a state, but it does belong to the U.S. and has a lot of similarities to the U.S. They do speak a lot more Spanish there than we do here in the U.S. though. So my brother and I went down to Puerto Rico, and I wanted to show you some pictures and some of the things from our adventures there. So first of all, here's just a nice overlook. We just stayed in the capital city. So I don't have a ton of pictures from our time there, but just a few. So here's a picture of the capital city right on the coast in San Juan. Now, David and I went down to Puerto Rico to help them recover from a hurricane that they had the year before. And it had been a whole year, but there still was a lot of damage around when we went around to visit the island. Obviously, the signboard is tipped over. We went to really help a school and church ministry that had been devastated by the hurricane. And you can see they have like no ceiling here, right in the middle of their classroom. It was a mess. So by the time we got there, back up. By the time we got there, they'd gotten the roof put back on, and it was our job to put up the ceiling. So here it just shows like the lights and stuff, and it is a lot of work. We spent most of our time in the ceiling, or most of our time cutting panels and measuring everything to fit in the little corners and stuff to put the ceilings back together, so then it looked like this.
Wow.
I know, so nice, right?
Good job.
So then they could have school in a few weeks. But we did get to take one day to do a little touring around the San Juan area. And I'll show you some of those pictures after I tell you a quick story. Well, this is their main church building. They're almost done painting it. I think it was going to be all that nice green color instead. But during the hurricane, it blew part of the roof off their church building. But here's the amazing thing. They had this beautiful grand piano that somebody had given them from the States and had been shipped over there. They had taken care of it, everything. Coolest thing ever. Like, so much of the building was ruined, but not even a drop of water was on this piano. It survived the hurricane, all the damage, everything. It was really cool to see how God protected them.
God likes pianos.
I think he likes music too.
Yeah, that's it.
So here is my brother David and I when we went to visit the old city of San Juan in Puerto Rico. And actually, I did a little looking about San Juan, and it's the oldest city in the U.S. and its territories.
Wow.
I know, it's really old. Christopher Columbus discovered the island in 1493, and he called it San Juan Bautista, like John the Baptist, Island. And then they named the city right on the port where this picture is taken. They called the city Puerto Rico because it was a great place for ships to come in and out and do lots of trading and stuff. And then a cartographer got mixed up, and he switched the name from the city and the island, and then it stuck. So now the island is Puerto Rico.
What's a cartographer? Is that a map maker?
Yeah, map maker. The city is really beautiful though. They have a lot of colors in their buildings. This was just one of them. And they've got a lot of really cool stuff right in the city. A lot of the streets are all this old, like, brick kind of stuff, and it's back from the ancient times. But the city was really well fortified. They were prepared to defend against all kinds of pirates and attacks. And once the Spanish held their control of the island, they didn't want to let it go. So they built some serious forts. The forts, one of them, El Morro Fort, has walls that are 18 feet thick.
Ooh.
They really didn't want anybody getting in. And you can see one fort kind of closer to us, and then one way off at the other point over there. So we got to visit both of those. Here it is, one up a little bit closer with a nice lighthouse. And actually, they only lost control of these forts one time in all of history, one time to pirates, and it was only for a few days. They got it right back again. But there's a lot of old history and some really cool things if you go and visit there. I really like the shape of these things. They're so cool. They're like these little lookout towers. You could like go in, and they have a couple windows if you were trying to like hold your gun there and defend from that point. But they're pretty narrow spaces. You kind of had to walk.
Skinny.
Yeah. Be skinny and keep your arms right at your side. And sometimes you might have fun. Don't worry, these weren't real bombs. They're just funny, pretend, old ones.
I bet they were real at one time.
Well, yes, but they're not active anymore. So sometimes when you go adventuring, you can have fun too.
Usually you can.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about Puerto Rico. I have a little more to share with you next week, so make sure you come back then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, good job to those of you who found the Peruvian flag last week. It wasn't too hard. This week, we have something that might be a little harder. I'm not sure. You'll just have to look around and see if you can see anything that's a little different than it might have been before. And if you can't tell what it is, maybe you need to go back and watch the other ones or watch them for the first time. But anyway, if you can find that, put it in the comments, yell it out.
We'll try to listen.
Yes. So right now, Alyssa's going to go into part 4 of Operation Auca.
Yeah.
You'll have to come back next week for the grand finale, right?
You will.
All right.
The last part. Okay, here we go. Well, last time we talked about different missionary groups, a few different missionary families, and how they all had something in common, that they cared about the Auca people and that they wanted to be able to reach them and tell them about the gospel. And at the end of our story last time, Nate finally spotted an Auca village, and they got really, really excited because now they were one step closer to meeting the Auca people, letting them know that they were friendly and that they really wanted to share about Christ's love with them. So let's keep going with our story today. As soon as they found the village, they began making plans. They had to do something to let the Auca people know that they were friendly. So Nate went to Dayuma and started to learn some words from her, like, I am your friend, we like you, we're friendly. Just some common phrases that would help them be able to tell the Auca people that they weren't there to hurt them. But Dayuma warned Nate. She said, you shouldn't learn these things. The Auca people will act like they will be friendly, but then they will kill you. You shouldn't say these things. Nate didn't tell her what they were planning. The missionaries just kept it to themselves. They didn't tell anybody else that they wanted to try to talk to the Auca people because they thought other people might discourage them and say it's too dangerous. But Nate listened to Dayuma, but he still wanted to learn those phrases and be able to reach out to the Auca people. So he began to come up with a cool plan of how they could give gifts to the Auca people. So they tied a rope onto a bucket, and Nate practiced flying so he could keep the bucket in one spot, which would be really tricky. So he could keep it in one spot and people could take things out of the bucket. And he even devised a really cool like click system so that if the Aucas were kept pulling on the bucket or they couldn't get stuff out of it, then he could just release it so then they could have whatever was in there. So that was his plan, and they decided to try it out. So they put some small gifts in the bucket and they lowered it really close to the village where some of the people lived. And Nate went slower and slower and just kind of held it there, hoping that it would pause long enough and the Aucas would be able to get it. They didn't really come out of the jungle though for a while. They just watched And Nate and some of the missionaries would call out from the airplane that they were their friends, that they liked them, and they wanted to reach out to them. And finally, a couple Aucas came out of the jungle and they looked in the bucket. And they took some of the things. And Nate and the other missionaries were so excited. This was perfect. Well, as they kept flying over and bringing gifts to the people, they noticed that there was a beach and kind of like a little river across from the village where the Auca people were living. So they began to plan and to pray with their families and their wives, and they decided that they were going to land the plane across the river from where the Auca people were living, and they were going to stay there, kind of like camping out, and see if they could try to talk to the people. Now that they were a little closer after having dropped gifts and seen them a few times, so maybe that wasn't so scary to them anymore. So they prayed about it, and they went ahead and did it. They gathered the supplies. They had to pack a lot of supplies, like all their food and some tents and blankets, stuff for the bugs, because there would be a lot of bugs in the jungle. They packed up the stuff in the plane, and it took Nate multiple trips back and forth to get the supplies out there. And they set up a little tent, and they waited. And they sat under their tent, they tried to shoo the bugs away, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited, hoping to see some of the people. And at one point they did see a few of the people, and they waved at them, and they used the phrases that the Yuma had told them. We like you, we're friends. And the people didn't do too much to them. But one of the Auca people came out of the jungle across the river and came to them. They named him George. They just thought that was a good name for him. And George came over and they talked with him, and they had a camera and they took some pictures with George. And they took some pictures of the other people across the river when they were looking at them. And George kind of pointed at their airplane, and Nate thought, well, what if we take him for a ride in the airplane? We'll show that we're friendly. So Nate got in the airplane with George and they began to fly around. And Nate got a little nervous once they started to get up in the air. He thought, well, what happens if he tries to hurt me or tries to fly the plane? But he trusted that this was all in God's plan, that this is how it was supposed to be. Well, they took George for a trip around in the airplane, and then they came back and they landed on the beach, and George went back into the jungle. Well, they were so excited. Nate and Ed and Jim and Pete, they were so excited that they had seen the Auca people and that they had gotten a chance to spend some time with George, and they thought, this is perfect. George will go back and he'll tell the people that we're friendly and nothing wrong happened. But there was kind of some problems they didn't even know about. George was a troublemaker in the Auca village, and he kind of had been causing problems. And so when he went over to see the missionaries, then it was causing problems when he came back, and he told a lie. He told the people when he got back to the village that the missionaries had tried to eat him and that they had tried to take him away, which wasn't the truth. So he got the people of the village all riled up and all excited, not for the right reason. And the next morning, Nate and Jim and Pete and Ed, they all got up and they were talking, and they started to see some of the people gathering, the Auca people gathering across the river. And they radioed back to their wives. They said, we're so excited. I think we're going to meet them. We're going to see a lot of them today. And they left that message with their families. But instead of coming to meet them, the Auca warriors came out across the river and they killed the missionaries. All of them died that day. Now, it might seem really sad. Like, they went over there to try to talk to them and to tell them about God. And then they died. The people didn't understand why Nate and Jim and Ed and Pete, why they had gone over there. They didn't understand why. But God had a plan. Because as soon as these missionaries died, newspapers began to write the story about how each one of these men had loved the Auca people enough to go to Ecuador, to pray for these people, and then to go spend time trying to get to know them, and they had given their lives. They hadn't fought back. They hadn't tried to hurt the Auca people like so many others. They had loved them all the way to the point that they gave their lives because they loved them that much. Well, journals and newspapers wrote these messages, and people back in the States began to read the stories. And some people realized that they should be going to be missionaries somewhere. And a whole new group of people came together to be missionaries. And a whole group of people began to pray for the Auca people. Pray that someday they would get to hear about Jesus and that they would understand that what they had done was wrong. And you know what? They did start to understand what they did was wrong. Later, the Auca people told stories that after they killed the missionaries, that they saw angels in the sky and that they knew something was wrong. They shouldn't have done what they did. But it was really sad, and it was really sad not just for the Auca people, once they kind of realized that they didn't do something right, but it was also sad for all of the families of these missionaries. But those families still chose love, and they didn't choose to hate the Auca people or get upset. They still chose to pray for them. Even Nate's sister, Rachel, she took the pictures that they had taken with their camera. They recovered the camera and they printed the pictures, and she showed the pictures to Dayuma, and she explained what had happened. And Dayuma said, that's what would happen. If you try to do that, they will not trust you. They will kill you. That is how it is. But Rachel continued to tell Dayuma, it's okay. We still love them. God still loves them. God still has a plan for them. And she showed Dayuma the pictures, and Dayuma got so excited. She looked at some of the pictures and she recognized people. She saw her sister. She saw her aunt. Some of her family was still alive and living in that village. But she wondered, was her mother still alive? Would she ever get to go back and meet them? Is there any way that those Auca people will let anybody else come into the village to tell them about Jesus? Well, you're going to have to come back next week to hear the last part of the story. Now, this part of the story might seem like it's super sad and it's like the worst thing ever. But you know what? God can use a sad thing or something that seems really bad, and He can use it to bring glory to Him and to help other people hear about Jesus. So the story's not over yet. We still have more to go, so make sure you come back next week to find out.
All right. We are ready to tell you about some friends of ours who live in Germany. So let's get right into it. We went to school with these people, Luke and Bethany Snell. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I turned to it already. There we go.
That's okay.
That was my fault. That's why you saw the black screen and then flipped back to us. Luke and Bethany Snell. Luke was in the dorm with me. He lived with me there at Faith Baptist Bible College. And Bethany, I played in the orchestra with her. She played violin and some other instruments as well. And we were in there together. And I was in... Oh, I keep forgetting I'm sorry. Here we go. Here they are. So now you know their names, now you see their faces. Luke and I also played in orchestra for I think a year, but then we also did some other things together, I think basketball a few times. And anyway, they went to Germany with the choir from Faith, or they also call it the chorale. And as a result of being there and seeing the ministries of the churches in the country of Germany, God used that to give them a passion for the people there and to see them come to know Him as their Savior. So they are in Germany today. They are living in a town, and I don't know exactly how to pronounce this. I am half German, but I don't know German. The town of Oberfrandorf. Oberfrandorf. Close enough, I think. They have been there filling in for some missionaries on furlough, but they will be moving next month to Ingelheim am Rhine and beginning a new ministry there. So, here is a picture of the church there in Oberfrandorf.
It's a pretty good sized church family.
It is.
Kind of exciting.
Yeah. So, we asked them what are some ways that they are reaching out to build relationships with people in the area. And they said that Luke joined a basketball team. I know that he loves basketball, so that fits in really well with him. Bethany joined a mom's fitness group. And in their new location where they are or I think where they're going in a month, Bethany has already found a community orchestra that she's hoping to be a part of. Getting involved in the community is one of the best ways to get to know saved people in the area. Luke especially has had some great opportunities to share Christ with some of his basketball teammates. And their church has planned a barbecue fun fest type outreach for this month, but it was canceled because of the coronavirus. And so now they have to be creative to find different ways to connect with the community. If you were to go to Germany, you would see a lot of beautiful castles.
That is so beautiful.
Okay.
It's like something out of a storybook.
This is a really famous castle, and the reason you would see it in a storybook is because they modeled their storybooks after this castle. But this is a real castle, and it's actually one of my dad's favorite castles. He's been there. But one thing that's unique about Germany is all the castles, because it's an old country that has a lot of these. And they love the castles, Luke and Bethany do. They say they are all over the place. In fact, they have castle ruins right outside their town that they can see when they walk out their front door.
Huh.
Now, I don't think this is right outside their front door, but it's probably pretty close. Or maybe it's another castle that's similar. But either way, the cities there are very old and have a lot of history. They live close to Nuremberg, a city that is still surrounded by an old medieval stone wall and is a fortress on a hill overlooking the city. It's also where the German Nazi Party had their headquarters when Hitler was in power, which makes sense for the government to just take over this spot that's probably historical and has some significance and use that as their headquarters. Here is the castle outside their town. Oh, sorry.
This is their castle. No, that was right. That was the castle outside their town. And then that's her and a friend.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I had them in the wrong order. This is the castle outside their town, and this one that we looked at earlier is a friend with a very famous castle.
Yep.
And I believe that is a friend from the church where Bethany attended when she went to Faith Baptist Bible College. Because I know her. All right, as you can see, they have two boys, two cute little boys. And so we asked them, what do children, not just their children, but children in general in Germany, what do they spend their days doing? She said they have lots of parks and playgrounds, which are usually full of children playing. Germany also has a lot of clubs that kids and adults can get involved in. Everything from music clubs to sports clubs to nature clubs. And wow, they even have a circus club.
That'd be fun.
I've never even heard of that before. So we asked them how we could pray for them this week. They said we started having services again last week, but they have many regulations to follow, just like us. Keeping everyone 6 feet apart, wearing masks. I'm sure they have to really disinfect everything and clean everything once they're done. So you could pray that they will have wisdom in doing their ministry and while still keeping the rules. Because keeping rules is important. They are getting ready to move next month to Ingeldorf?
Ingelheim, I think?
Ingelheim. Ingelheim. And then they're going to fly back to the States in July for a 6-month furlough. So that sounds really busy.
Yeah.
In June, they're moving to a new town. Then a month later, they're flying back here for 6 months. So you can pray that everything will go smoothly. Especially for their kids. Because when you're that young, you don't always understand everything that's happening. You also may not be as stressed out. But, that's a lot of change in just a couple months for them. You could pray also for the salvation of 2 men, Martin and Klaus. Those are 2 unsaved husbands of some ladies there in the church. So that is Luke and Bethany Snell. It's exciting to hear from them. They are great people. I know that they love God a lot and really have a great passion for helping other people know Him and using the talents that God has given them to reach other people. They're both very talented, and yet they're willing to use those things for the cause of Christ.
Yep.
So remember those prayer requests. Pray for those 2 men in their church, Martin and Klaus, who need to be saved. And also for them as they are moving to a new town next month, and then the month after that, coming back to the U.S. for 6 months.
Busy.
Yes. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We do hope that you'll come back next week. We have one more week of Puerto Rico, one more week of the missionary story, and then we're going to wrap up the missionaries that we covered the last 4 weeks. Okay. If you enjoyed this, please share it with others. Leave a comment down below if you learned something. If you have any questions, whatever it is, and like it. That helps us. And we don't need it, but we'd like it. We like you, and we hope you like us. But either way, we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.